It started with the parking meter. I know how that sounds, like the opening to some bad joke or a setup for one of those internet creepypastas that never quite deliver. But I swear to you, this is the truth. It happened last October in the French Quarter of New Orleans. The air was thick with the smell of river water, fried beignets, and something else, something old and slow and patient. I was there with Chloe with her laugh that could cut through any room, and her way of touching my arm when she made a point that we'd been friends since college, a will-they-won't-they dance that had stretched for years, fueled by late-night texts and a mutual unspoken attraction that we were both too scared to act on. This trip was supposed to be the thing that finally tipped the scales. 3 days in New Orleans, just the two of us. No work, no other friends, no excuses. She was wearing a thin, white sleeveless top and cut-off denim shorts that showed off her legs, long and toned from all those SoulCycle classes she was always talking about. I remember watching her walk ahead of me on Domain Street, the way her hips swayed, the smooth skin of her lower back exposed just above the waistband of her shorts. A delicate silver chain rested there, and I found myself fixated on it, on the small, almost imperceptible dip of her spine. I had a sudden vivid image of pressing my thumb into that hollow. The thought was so sharp and inappropriate for the bright, tourist-filled afternoon that I felt a flush of guilt. "This one's free," she called over her shoulder, pointing to a spot right on the corner, tucked under the lacy ironwork of a second-floor balcony. I parallel parked my beat-up Honda Civic, a minor victory in the tight space. The humidity was already plastering my shirt to my back. "All right," I said, killing the engine. "Let's feed the beast." That's when we saw it. The parking meter. It was an old model, the kind you still see sometimes in cities clinging to the past. A single rust-speckled metal pole with a rounded head, its face a dusty glass window showing faded black numbers. But it was the payment slot that was wrong. Instead of the standard coin slot or a credit card reader, there was a single, narrow, vertical slit, like a thin, hungry mouth. Chloe leaned in, her shoulder brushing against mine. A jolt went through me. She smelled of sunscreen and her coconut shampoo. Weird. What kind of coin goes in that? I pulled out my phone. I'll just use the app. The city's got to have an app for this, right? But there was no sticker, no QR code. My phone, which had full bars a second ago, suddenly showed no service. A spinning wheel of death where my map should have been. "No signal?" she asked. "Must be the buildings," I muttered, though it felt like a lie. The air was too still. I dug into my pocket and pulled out a handful of change, quarters, dimes, a few nickels. I tried to slide a quarter into the slot. It wouldn't fit. The slit was too narrow. I tried a dime. Nothing. It was as if the metal itself was rejecting the coins. "Let me try," Chloe said. She took a quarter from my palm, her fingers cool against my skin. She pushed, her brow furrowed in concentration. I watched the way her top stretched across her chest, the faint sheen of sweat on her collarbone. For a stupid, heart-thumping moment, all my anxiety about the meter narrowed down to the simple, primal fact of her proximity. The coin wouldn't budge. "This is ridiculous," she sighed, stepping back. "Maybe we should just find another spot." That's when he spoke. His voice was dry, raspy, like pages turning in a book that hadn't been opened in a century. "It won't take that." We both jumped. He was standing maybe 5 feet away, leaning against a moss-green stucco wall, half in shadow. I hadn't heard him approach. He was an older man, though it was hard to pin an age on him. His skin was pale and deeply lined, like cracked porcelain, and he wore a dark, heavy wool suit that was all wrong for the New Orleans heat. In his hands, he held a wide-brimmed black hat, which he was slowly turning over and over by the brim. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice coming out tighter than I intended. He didn't move from the wall. His eyes, a flat, murky gray, were fixed on the meter. The meter. It only accepts vintage coins, specific ones. Chloe gave a nervous little laugh. "Vintage coins? What does that even mean?" The man's gaze slid from the meter to her. It was a slow, deliberate motion. I saw his eyes travel down her body, from her face to her bare legs, and a cold knot tightened in my stomach. It wasn't a look of lust. Not exactly. It was more like appraisal, like he was assessing the quality of something. "It means what it means," he said, his voice still that same dry whisper. "A coin minted the year one of your ancestors died." A silence fell between us, thick and heavy. A streetcar clanged in the distance, but the sound felt muffled, far away. That's incredibly specific, I finally managed, and how are we supposed to know that? The man gave a slow, thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. You'll know. He pushed himself off the wall and without another word began to walk away down the cobblestone street, his shoes making no sound as he turned a corner and was gone. Chloe turned to me, her face pale. What the hell was that? A local crazy, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Trying to mess with the tourists? Come on, let's just go, that will risk the ticket. But as we started to walk away, a deep, mechanical clunk sounded from behind us that we both spun around. The meter's display, which had been counting down from 0, now showed 2 hours in crisp, red digital numbers. My blood ran cold that we hadn't put any money in. Did you? Chloe whispered. No, we stood there for a full minute just staring at the meter. The sun was bright, the air was hot, tourists were laughing as they passed by with their go-cups, but all of it felt like a painted backdrop. The real world had shrunk down to this one spot on Domain Street, this rusted metal pole, and the lingering chill of the man in the wool suit. Forget it, I said, forcing a laugh that came out strangled. We got the time. Let's just go see the city. We spent the day trying to lose ourselves in the energy of the French Quarter. We drank sugary hurricanes on Bourbon Street, listened to a jazz band in Jackson Square, and browsed the stalls of the French market. But the encounter with the stranger was a splinter in my mind that I kept seeing his flat gray eyes, the way he'd looked at Chloe. And I kept looking at her, the fear, the unease, it did something strange to my perception of her that sharpened everything. When she reached for a beignet, I watched the delicate bones in her wrist move under her skin. When she leaned over a balcony to look at the street below, I stared at the curve of her backside in those denim shorts, a surge of desire so potent and ill-timed it felt like a sickness. I'd imagine what it would be like to pull her into a dark, quiet doorway, to feel her heart hammering against my chest, not from fear, but from want. The fantasies were a desperate, hormonal escape from the growing dread, and they made me feel guilty and twisted that we were in a voodoo shop on Rue Royale, surrounded by jars of herbs and little gris-gris bags, when she brought it up again. He knew, Mark, she said, her voice low. She was holding a small leather-bound journal, but she wasn't looking at it, her eyes were distant. That man, that he knew the meter would do that. It was a coincidence, I insisted, though I didn't believe it. A glitch. The timer just reset. It clunked, she said, her gaze snapping to mine. Right after he left, and his suit, Mark, who wears a wool suit in this heat? I had no answer for that. The shop felt suddenly colder, the beads in the doorway clacked softly. Later, as dusk began to settle, painting the sky in shades of violet and orange, we found ourselves walking back toward the car. The 2 hours were almost up. The plan was to move it, find a garage, and be done with the whole weird experience. But as we turned onto Domain, we saw him again, that he was standing across the street in the same spot, leaning against the same moss-green wall, that he wasn't looking at us, that he was staring at our parking meter, that as we watched, frozen, he gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. The meter let out another loud clunk. The display reset. 2 more hours. Chloe's hand shot out and gripped my arm, her nails digging into my skin. He's doing it, she breathed. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through me. Let's just get in the car and go. We practically ran to the Civic. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock, that I threw myself into the driver's seat. Chloe scrambling in beside me, that I started the engine and slammed the car into gear, peeling away from the curb without even checking my mirrors. I drove for 10 minutes, taking random turns, my heart pounding in my ears, that I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see his pale, expressionless face in the back seat, or his dark-suited form standing on a corner, watching us go. Do you see him? Chloe asked, her voice small. She had pulled her knees up to her chest, her bare feet on the seat. That I glanced over, saw the elegant line of her calf, the pink polish on her toenails. The contrast between her vulnerable beauty and the sheer terror of the situation was dizzying. No, I said, forcing myself to focus on the road. No, I think we lost him. We found a multi-story parking garage near Canal Street, paid an exorbitant fee, and finally left the car. The relief was immense, a physical weight lifting from my shoulders, that we decided to get dinner, to try and salvage the night. That we found a quiet restaurant with a courtyard, string lights twinkling overhead that we ordered wine and rich, heavy Cajun food. For a little while it worked. The wine warmed my veins and Chloe's laughter started to sound real again. Under the table our knees brushed and this time the contact felt electric with possibility, not fear. I looked at her across the flickering candle, at the way the light caught the gloss of her lower lip, and I thought, to hell with it. Hell with the man, the meter, all of it, this is why we're here. This is nice, she said as if reading my mind. She smiled, a real warm smile that reached her eyes. I was starting to feel, I don't know, spooked. Me too, I admitted, but he's just some guy that we're in a city of 1 million people that will never see him again. I reached across the table and took her hand, her fingers were slender and cool in mine. She didn't pull away. She just looked at me, her expression soft and open. For a beautiful, suspended moment, everything was perfect. Then her phone, which was sitting on the table next to her wine glass, lit up. It wasn't a call or a text. It was a photo. A photo of the two of us, right at this moment, holding hands across the table. The color drained from her face. She snatched up the phone, her thumb swiping frantically. What? How? What is it? I asked, my own good mood evaporating. She turned the screen to me. It was the photo, clear as day. Me, looking at her with what was probably a stupid, love-struck expression. Her, smiling back. It was taken from just a few feet away from the other side of a potted fern at the edge of our courtyard booth. My head snapped up, scanning the restaurant. The courtyard was dim, filled with the murmur of other diners. I saw couples, families, a group of women laughing. No dark suit. No pale, lined face. It must be a glitch, I said, my voice hollow. A memory photo or something. Your cloud. It just appeared, Mark, she whispered, her eyes wide with a fresh terror. It's not in my camera roll. It just showed up on my lock screen. She showed me again. She was right. It was her lock screen. A notification that simply said, new photo. I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the flagstones. We're leaving, now. We paid the bill and hurried out onto the street. The vibrant energy of the French Quarter now felt menacing, every shadow a potential hiding place. We walked quickly, not talking, our shoulders pressed together. I could feel the tension radiating from her body. Every time a man in a dark jacket passed us, my heart would seize, but it was never him. We were a block from the garage when my own phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, a cold dread already coiling in my gut. It was a Google Photos notification. On this day 1 year ago. The photo that popped up was one I had never seen before. It was a black and white image, grainy and faded. It showed a young man in old-fashioned clothes standing on a cobblestone street. He was leaning against a moss-green stucco wall. The street was Domain. The man was my great-great-grandfather, a man I only knew from a single, stern portrait in my grandmother's house. A man who had died in 1883. The caption, auto-generated by the photo recognition, sent a spike of pure ice through my veins. Mark, is this you? I showed Chloe. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. How? Was all she could manage. I don't know, I said, my mind reeling. Some kind of deep fake? A hack. The explanation sounded pathetic even to my own ears. We finally made it to the garage. It was poorly lit, smelling of damp concrete and exhaust fumes. Our footsteps echoed unnaturally loud as we walked up the ramps to the 4th floor where we'd parked. The place was mostly empty, a cavern of concrete and steel. When we reached the Civic, we both stopped dead. Sitting on the windshield, directly under the wiper blade, was a single, tarnished silver coin. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to go anywhere near it. But I made myself. I plucked it from the glass. It was cold, unnaturally so, as if it had just come from a freezer. It was an old Morgan silver dollar. I turned it over in my trembling fingers. The mint year was 1883. The year my great-great-grandfather died. A low, soft laugh echoed through the concrete silence of the garage. We spun around. He was there, standing at the mouth of the ramp, about 50 yards away. He wasn't looking at us. He was looking at his own hands, still turning that wide-brimmed black hat over and over. He's here, Chloe whimpered, her body pressing against my side. I could feel her trembling. The man began to walk toward us. His steps were slow, measured, and utterly silent on the grimy concrete. He didn't hurry. He had all the time in the world. Get in the car, I hissed at Chloe, fumbling for my keys. She yanked on the passenger door handle. It's locked. I stabbed the unlock button on my key fob. Nothing happened. The lights on the car didn't flash. That I tried again, and again. The man kept walking, closing the distance. 30 yards. 20. That I tried to put the key in the lock, but my hands were shaking too badly. The key scratched against the metal, a horribly loud sound in the tense quiet. 10 yards. That I finally got the key in, turned it. The lock popped up. That I shoved Chloe inside and scrambled in after her, slamming the door and hitting the lock button manually. That he was right outside my window. His face was inches from the glass, those flat gray eyes staring in at me. Up close, his skin was like parchment, a network of fine lines and cracks. That he didn't look angry. That he didn't look anything. That he just looked empty. He raised a single bony finger and tapped once gently on the driver's side window. Asterisk tap. Asterisk. Then he pointed past me at Chloe. She was curled in her seat, her face buried in her knees, her whole body shaking. The denim of her shorts was stretched tight over her thighs. That I had a horrifying, intrusive thought of that same fabric tearing, a flash of panic and desire so intertwined I felt nauseous. The man outside the window smiled his thin, bloodless smile. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing down the ramp into the darkness. That I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. That I couldn't move. That I could only listen to the ragged sound of my own breathing and Chloe's quiet, hitching sobs. After what felt like an eternity, I tried the ignition. The car started immediately. The electronics all came back to life. I drove us out of the garage in a terrified daze, not caring about the exit fee, not caring about anything but putting distance between us and that place. That we didn't speak on the drive back to the hotel. That we went up to our separate rooms. Another part of